all the sessions will be recorded. If you don't want to appear, I would suggest you to or remove your name or remove your video altogether. And let me start again. So today is my immense pleasure to introduce you a phenomenal keynote. I met Michael in 2003 when I was the conference chair of the second ICF European conference. And I always found his speeches engaging and illuminating. He's the world's leading authority on genius thinking and a pioneer in the fields of creative thinking, innovative leadership, and executive coaching. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Humanistic Management and a member of the leading people and organizations advisory board at the Fordham University Gabelli School of Business. And Michael was also awarded a Batten Fellowship in Innovation from the University of Virginia's Darden Graduate School of Business. I made it. He's the author of 17 books, some of them really true global bestsellers, like How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, that was translated in 25 languages. So please join me in a virtual death applause for Michael Gelb.
Thank you so much, Giovanna. Hello, everybody. I love that. Yeah, cool. So you read through some of that bio, and let me try to make a little sense of that for you in terms of what brings us all together. The last thing I ever thought I'd have anything to do with was business. My dad, I went to visit my dad yesterday. He's 95, and he was an oral surgeon. His specialty was if you went to the dentist and the dentist did a bad job and you were in terrible pain, my dad was the specialist they would send you to fix the bad work of the other dentist and take you out of pain. And the reason he was so good at his work for 45 years he was in practice is that he wasn't just technically competent, but he also cared about people. He had a healing presence that, because you know what it's like when you go to the dentist, you're terrified, especially if the first dentist messed you up. So my dad would help people feel calm, and then he had the technical ability to help sort out their problem. And my mom, who is 90, for many years was a psychologist in the Passaic County Mental Health Clinic. So in other words, this was a public municipal mental health facility where people were sent by the government, by the state, for treatment, often from prison. So my mother would work with murderers and sociopaths and psychopaths. But she said that after raising me, that was easy. So my mom was also involved in healing people who were in pain. They're still known around the area where they worked for many years as mental and dental. But what I learned from them, just by their example, when it came time for me to decide, well, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to be when I grow up? I knew it had something to do with healing. I knew it had something to do with helping other people. So you can imagine, this was also the 60s and the early 70s, so I was a hippie. So the absolute last thing I thought about was business at all. I first became a teacher of the Alexander technique. I was also a professional juggler. That's how I worked my way through graduate school. I wrote a thesis about the mind and the body connection. That became published as my first book. But then a funny thing happened. I was giving lessons in the Alexander technique to a friend who turned out to be a very successful author and global business consultant. And he invited me to come along to a business conference. This was in 1978 in Vevey, Switzerland, at the conference center called Le Mirador. And he invited me to come along and share some of my work with this senior executive team of this global computer company. So I thought, okay, cool. I won't hold it against them that they're in business. Let's see what it's like. And they were very receptive, really liked what I taught them. And the head of human resources for this whole global company said, we want this young American on all our seminars around the world. So I started traveling all over the world, doing 5-day seminars for people at that time who were twice my age. And now I do seminars around the world for people who are half my age. But the thing that I began to see, and it took a while, I have to tell you, it took a while for this to sink in. Because at first I was, well, these people don't seem so bad, and they seem like good people. And then it suddenly dawned on me, they're good people who are in a system that isn't necessarily all that conscious. And I thought, how could we change the system? How could we make business more healing? Because it's the most powerful force in the world. I realized it was more powerful than governments, more powerful than NGOs and nonprofits. Business was where the money and the power was. And I was in California doing a seminar, and I was with a group of people who were all involved in philanthropy. They had sponsored my seminar. They had all inherited money, and they were all trying to figure out what to do with their money to make the world better. And so somebody had a great place overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And I remember they had a beautiful golden colored California Chardonnay. And somebody raised their glass and they said, here's to the good people having the money. And I thought, wow, what a concept. Because I grew up, thinking, well, money, business, power must be bad. Hippies, love, peace, long hair must be good. So over the years, I slowly but surely developed this concept of what today I call the healing organization and healing leadership. And I want to just take you through a little bit of what I've seen and how I understand this, to give you something to think about, hopefully, and to contemplate. So I'm going to share my screen. And there we go. So Giovanna shared with you some of my books, and I'm just giving you this screen just to put them in context, that the healing organization, awakening the conscience of business to help save the world, is the through line of everything I've ever done from those early days when I began to think that, hey, maybe business can make a difference. But it took up until just a few years ago to actually write that book. Because for the first 10 or 20 years, it was hard to talk about that sort of thing. And it was only until conscious capitalism began to emerge and other pro-social business movements that really gained some momentum. The healing organization was co-authored with the co-founder of conscious capitalism. And so the other books, we won't go into them, the other books that Giovanna mentioned, they're all the skills you need to be a healing leader, because it's a great idea, but it's not easy. It means being conscious. It means being compassionate. It means being caring. It also means being creative. So my work's always been devoted to how do you develop all of those essential abilities that we need to be a healing leader. But let's talk about the healing organization and the purpose of business. And before we do that, I hope you can all see the picture of Sumo, our now 12-and-a-half-year-old Akita. You see the picture of him breathing. He's actually with us. He's still with us. He's now 12 and a half years old. He broke his leg 3 times. You can see, if you look carefully at the picture where he's breathing and you look at his back leg, you'll see a leg brace, which my wife, Deborah, lovingly had crafted for him, and she takes it off and puts it on him every day. It's kept him alive for an extra 4 years. So you ask yourself, what's the purpose of Sumo's life? Sumo is his name. What's the purpose of Sumo's life? And you might look at him and say, well, is it breathing? Because he just seems to hang around breathing. That's what he's doing right now. He just hangs around breathing. But Sumo has a higher purpose to his life, of course. That higher purpose is love. He's just the embodiment of love. He doesn't do anything useful. His abilities as a guard dog faded many years ago. His purpose is love. And that's my wife, Deborah. Her love has kept this dog going, keeps me going, keeps a lot of people going. So, that's kind of obvious to think about. If you have a beloved animal companion in your life, they're there primarily just for love, especially if you get to see children interact with that animal companion. So what is the purpose of business? What is the purpose of business? So where we are right now is not too far from New York City. And if I went to New York City and walked along the street and stopped people at the subway or on Broadway, and I said, excuse me, can I have a couple minutes of your time? And it's New York, I'd probably have to pay them to talk to me, but give them $20 and say, okay, we just want to interview and ask you one question. What's the purpose of business? What do you think they would say? They'd say, yeah, make money. Make money. That's the #1 answer in the global survey when you ask people, what's the purpose of business? People say, make money. But I want to promote and express a different notion. The purpose of business is to promote human flourishing. The purpose of business is to promote human flourishing. The purpose of business is to make the world a better place and enrich the lives of all stakeholders. So today, I just want you to imagine this world in which business makes human flourishing its first priority. You see, Sumo has to breathe, right? He can't live without breathing, but the purpose of his life is not breathing, and business has to make a profit. But the purpose of business isn't profit, just like the purpose of Sumo's life isn't breathing. Business has a higher purpose, which is to promote human flourishing, to alleviate suffering, and to elevate joy. And this was the original idea of Adam Smith. We're all familiar with The Wealth of Nations, his classic book, which many people consider to be the Bible of contemporary capitalism. But what those people often have missed is that Adam Smith wrote another book 17 years before The Wealth of Nations called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And in that book, he laid out the purpose of business, which is to promote human flourishing. And Smith's vision was especially to uplift people who did not have as much opportunity. He felt that those disenfranchised people, when they're given the opportunities that business could provide, would flourish, and therefore society would flourish, and that democracy would flourish. based on that integration of the theory of moral sentiments and the wealth of nations. So capitalism has a bad name for a lot of reasons. We've seen so many abuses, but if you look at the big picture, in the world, poverty has been reduced dramatically, extreme poverty. The world's a much better place as a result of capitalism, despite all of it, the harm, collateral damage it's done. But we've reached an inflection point because there is no planet B. So this is a scene. This is not far from here, where we live. This is the Rockefeller State Preserve. And you've heard the name Rockefeller. He and his family donated this huge park. This is twice the size of Central Park. That's the carriage trail where they still take the horse and buggies along this trail, but now they gave it to the state of New York so we can all go for a beautiful walk through this wonderful scene. And Rockefeller is an embodiment of a previous era of capitalism. He had a surprisingly noble sounding philosophy. He said, "I believe the power to make money is a gift of God. Having been endowed with the gift, it is my duty to make money and to use it for the good of my fellow man according to the dictates of my conscience." And you've probably heard of this gentleman, Andrew Carnegie, who was in a competition with Rockefeller to see who would be the richest man in the world. I mean, it's bizarre that you're seeing something similar now with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. I don't think they really incorporate this. I don't think they've read the Healing Organization yet. I tried to send them a copy. But what's fascinating is Carnegie is actually buried in the cemetery, the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, that's part of the Rockefeller State Preserve. So you have these two titans of capitalism. And what's extraordinary is they both did amazing philanthropy. They endowed universities, libraries, hospitals, scholarships, foundations for the poor and the disenfranchised. But they did it after they helped to destroy the earth and ruin people's lives in order to take that money and then give it away. That's the old model of unconscious capitalism. Carnegie said, in the first third of your life, get as much education as you can. In the second third of your life, make as much money as you can. And in the last part of your life, give it all away. But we can't, as a planet, afford that philosophy anymore. So you recognize these characters. That's Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. And they initiated something that's enlightened but not good enough. It's called the Giving Pledge. I don't know if you've heard of this, but they both agreed to give away more than half of their money. And they're doing it now. To their credit, they're doing it now. And they started this organization and invited their fellow billionaires to join. And if you go to the Giving Pledge website, the last time I went, there were over 200 billionaire families who've committed to give away half of their money. But that model, that paradigm, isn't sufficient to the needs of our planet. Because what we've learned is that it matters how you make the money. It matters how you make the money. It's not okay to scorch the earth and destroy people's lives to make money and then give it away so you feel better before you go to hell. It matters how you make the money. Business is the dominant force in our lives, for better or for worse. In the US, which still is the most powerful economy in the world, government and nonprofits make up only 20% of the economy. 80% is business. So the suffering caused by business has been documented over and over again. Barbara Ehrenreich wrote this book about 30 years ago, showing how hard it was for just a regular person with an hourly job just to survive. She had a PhD and tried to just work as a person working as an hourly worker in the US, and she had to have 2 or 3 jobs. She suffered profoundly. She couldn't get health care. It's a tragic story. And more recently, Professor Jeffrey Pfeffer wrote this book. He's a professor at Stanford, saying that things have gotten worse. And obviously I'm sharing about the US, but this unfortunately is true around the world. Here, heart attacks are 20% higher on Monday morning because people don't have the heart to go back to work, where they often don't have a sense of higher purpose or meaning or alleviating suffering. They're just trading their time and their life energy for a paycheck. In the US, they call Wednesday hump day because people are trying to make it through the week. And then we have a whole chain of restaurants here called Thank God It's Friday, because people work is misery for so many people. So I share these statistics about the US, again, because this is supposed to be the wealthiest economy in the world, and 60% of our households are technically insolvent and in extreme debt. Most people here feel that they work for a company that does not care for them. And this is really tragic. The US, this prosperous material society, leads the world in obesity, addiction, incarceration, gun violence, depression, and teen suicide. So clearly, something is tragically wrong. And what's wrong is this idea that somehow you can separate humanity from business. And part of the challenge is that the model of business is based on the military, unfortunately. The way a lot of people operate, maybe you saw this movie about the founder of McDonald's, who famously stated, business is war, it's dog eat dog, rat eat rat. But I always say it's the winner of the rat race is still a rat. So we get these militaristic metaphors for how to do business. Our frontline people will capture market share so we can crush the competition and make a killing. There's still people who talk that way. So we're on a precipice of 2 possible futures based on the choices that we make now. Because business is profoundly powerful. And we're at a turning point where this, there's nothing more powerful. It's really fascinating. Despite everything, there's nothing more powerful in human history than the power of a great idea. And this, I believe, this idea that business can take the lead, not just in not doing harm, not just in social responsibility, not just in avoiding making things worse, but proactively, consciously, intentionally saying, no, the purpose of business is to alleviate suffering and elevate joy, to promote human flourishing. See, it was Homer Simpson said, alcohol is the cause and solution to all of life's problems, but I think it's business. And Smith understood this. He said, no society can be flourishing and happy of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable. So you've seen some evidence in recent years. A couple of years ago, Jamie Dimon from the Business Roundtable said, the doctrine of shareholder primacy has outlived its usefulness. And a lot of us were very hopeful that maybe that was representative of a real shift, although we haven't seen much action to back that up yet. Larry Fink runs the biggest investment firm in the world. And this is part of his letter to shareholders a couple of years ago, where he basically said, look, you have to have a higher purpose. The world needs you. It's up to business to make a difference. And that's who we're going to invest in. So this is happening. This is a movement. And there are lots of different organizations around the world, the Coalition for Inclusive Capitalism, Conscious Capitalism, the Social Venture Network, the B Corporation movement, and so many more that won't fit on this screen. So there is a consciousness, an awareness, but there's also a problem. You know, it's interesting. The biggest block to this, I find, is from the extremes of politics. Because from the right wing, they say, you can't even talk about business doing good because that's communism. And from the left wing, you get people to say, you can't even talk about business doing anything good because business is evil and has to be completely destroyed. I think both of those will lead us to disaster. I think there's a third way of thinking, which is the transformation of how we fundamentally think about the purpose of business, and then training people in the skills of healing leadership so that through every interaction, we think every interaction, am I applying these universal values of treat others as we want to be treated? So again, imagine a world in which business makes human flourishing its first priority. So there's so many stories that, just checking the time because I'd love to go into all of these with you, but maybe just, so the first story in the book, because, oh yeah, here's the deal. Let me just tell you this. So I've talked to you a little bit about the framework, and we go into the how it got this way and the evolution and the way capitalism went awry, how it lost touch with fundamental human values. All of the things that you already know are wrong with it. We understand and shared why that happened. But then we're trying to say, okay, how do you make it right? How do you bring back this essential, noble idea of Adam Smith about the theory of moral sentiments? And what's really cool is there are lots of people really doing this all over the world. And we got to know them. We actually, the ones we put in the book are the ones where we got to know the CEO. This is Kishore Chowdhury, who transformed the carpet weaving business in India. The business, and we figured, we led with this story in India because we figured if this can happen in India, where there's a caste system, and these women were from the lowest caste, and they were for years and years and years exploited by people from the middle caste, the merchants, who reported to the owners from the upper caste, and basically treated these women as indentured slaves. And Kishore Chowdhury, who's now known as the Gandhi of the carpet industry, everybody calls him NKC, he's a higher caste gentleman. He came along, he said, this is not our teaching, these are not our values. He created a whole other model. He said, we're going to eliminate the middle caste who exploits these women. And there's great, I mean, he got in trouble with members of his own caste, some of his family, because he would sit on the floor with the women and talk to them. What do you need? How can we help you? How can we make this business work? He started to get their thinking and their ideas. They started getting involved in designing the carpets. This is Shanti, one of the women. When you hear her story, you'll cry. I mean, I cry. I'm starting to cry I'm about to tear up just thinking about it, because she went from basically being an indentured slave to being an entrepreneur, working with 40,000 other women all around India whose lives have been dramatically changed by shifting this business model. She has 5 kids. They're all in college. A few have graduated by now. She's learned to speak English. When you go visit Jaipur Rugs, she greets you and talks about how her life and the lives of the sisterhood she's part of have been transformed by the shift to a healing model for what they all do. So there's lots of other stories. These are some of the businesses, some of the people that we interviewed. This is a software company in the Midwest of the US that invites everybody to bring their babies to work. Completely changed the culture. Look at those kids. This is New York's leading restaurateur, absolutely transformed the business model of how a restaurant operates. This is one of my clients, amazing guy, incredible healing leader named Chris Hillman. We've got people throughout the world who have adopted this philosophy. This is a company called Barry Waymiller. And they say we measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. Bob Chapman, the CEO of Barry Waymiller, has acquired more than 130 companies, industrial companies in the heartland of the USA, that these cities that have been devastated because they sent all the factories to China or Latin America. He came in, bought up the businesses, trained and developed the workers in what he calls truly human leadership. I can't tell you how much people love this company, because not just the people who work there, but he saved these cities that are now thriving. They've outsourced his leadership training program. It's a $10 million business by itself, because people want to know, how did you do this? How do you make so many people so happy? Oh, and by the way, they've made a 17% annualized profit since inception. This is the founder of a supermarket chain in Texas, who's, by the way, his family is a member of the Giving Pledge. And he told his CEO, he said, pay our people as much as you can, not as little as you can. So here's an acronym we created for healing. Be heroic, be evolving, translate noble intentions into action. Love is the essence of what we're talking about. Inspire people to believe that it's possible to do more than they've ever imagined. Always operate in harmony with nature. And we've got to develop the core competencies. We've got to ground this in practices, in, okay, how do you really do this? How do you change the model? How do you change? And it's highly complex. It's not easy. It's not easy. I'm working with companies who are really trying to do this, even when you have the buy-in of the senior leadership. So I'd love to have the time to talk to you about more of this, but let's just go right to His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, who said our prime purpose in life is to help others. If you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. And His Holiness the Pope, enterprises exist to serve. All human activities, including business, can be an exercise in mercy, which is partaking in God's love. So save a couple minutes for questions, but I want to give you the chance. I'll just take you through this. Don't feel obligated to take this now, but this is one of the things we do. We get people, after they think about this and maybe read the book or have a chance to talk about it, we invite business people around the world to take the healing oath. So I'm gonna take it myself, and you can reflect on it. And if it resonates with you, you can take it, and you can get your friends and clients to take it too. So it begins primum non nocere, first do no harm. It's the same as a physician. It's no harm to others or to the earth. Malis eradicare, root out evil, enable or collude with abuse or exploitation. I will be an everyday hero who stands up for fairness, truth, beauty, integrity, and basic goodness. And finally, amor vincit omnia. Love conquers all. I will operate from love. I will measure success by the fulfillment, abundance, and joy I generate for others. Grazie mille. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael.